1-second letdown last week, and also the overnight technical problems that contributed to the skepticism as to whether this bird is going to go or not. Still, some people have returned to this exact spot, and we'll be talking to some of them a little later. Frank?
Okay, thank you, Jack. There's the beautiful blue sky with only a few scattered clouds above the launch site here at the Kennedy Space Center. We're going to go now to the Johnson Space Center in Houston and Hugh Downs. Hugh?
Yeah, Frank, I think it's interesting why they fire the main engines and get them up to 90% strength for a few seconds before they light these solid rockets. They can't turn off the solid rockets once they go. And once these engines are lit, they're not on center line, and the whole thing flexes. This is a little bit flexible like a fishing rod. It flexes 25 inches under the impact of the firing of these. So they have to wait until it sort of springs back. And when it's in line again, these are lit, and then it's centered enough to go and not be off its line of ascent. In a way, this stack, the orbit and its tanks and boosters, it's a living, breathing thing. It has metabolism. It burns fuel, it develops temperature, it moves. And once we know it's also flexible, we have the feeling that, that it's more living than anything else. Frank?
Thank you, Hugh. It is indeed more living than anything else, as you said. Well, we are still in the planned hold at T-9, but in about a minute or so, they will pick up the count, and we're headed toward a 10 a.m. scheduled liftoff. Now, there are quite a few things to watch during the launch, that very important events that will take place, and Jules Bergman has prepared this report on exactly what takes place when the command is given, the engines start, and Columbia begins its journey.
T-9 minutes, the count resumes. The launch director has now made the decision to go for launch. T-7 minutes, the crew access arm is retracted. Now the only method of immediate escape for the crew is by using the ejection seats. T-5 minutes, the electronic safety pins are pulled. The solid rocket boosters can now be ignited. Range safety now has control of explosives which could destroy the shuttle if its flight path were to endanger people. T-2 minutes and 55 seconds. The orbiter is now on internal power. Final pressurization of the external fuel tank begins. The beanie-like vent cap is retracted. T-28 seconds. The orbiter's computers take control of the countdown. All 5 computers must be operating synchronously for the countdown to continue. T-7 seconds. The shuttle's 3 main engines ignite, one after the other. By T-3 seconds, the main engines must achieve 90% of their power. T-0, the moment of truth. Simultaneously, the hold-down bolts are blown as the solid rocket boosters are ignited. 0.3 of a second later, we have liftoff, with the shuttle clearing the tower at 6.8 seconds. 1/2 second later, the roll and pitch program begins, the maneuver necessary to put the boosters in Columbia in the right attitudes for orbit. T+43 seconds, the shuttle's main engines are throttled down just prior to the point where Columbia faces its maximum G-forces. 19 seconds later, the shuttle resumes full power. T+2 minutes 7 seconds, the solid rocket boosters burn out and separate from the shuttle. Now the Columbia's main engines are on their own for the final push to orbit.
Columbia is now steering for its precise window in space for main engine cutoff.
All right, that was a recorded report by Jules Bergman to tell you what to look for during the launch sequence. This is a live shot. We don't want to mislead you. The shuttle hasn't gone yet, but every indicator is that it will go. Here's a shot from way across the Indian River, across the beautiful blue waters. There does seem to be a little bit of haze, but boy, there is certainly none evident out here from our vantage point. And the countdown is expected to be resumed very shortly now, Gene.
I believe some of those events that Jules was reporting on, particularly all the way up through solid rocket booster, we ought to be able to see today with the naked eye and certainly with the television camera.
Jules, what kind of a view do you have out there? Is there a bit of mist between you and the launch pad?
Frank, that's a no. The mist or haze Jack Curtis has is because of the river, the Banana River and the Indian River lying between Titusville and the launch pad. It's clear as a bell.
Launch Director George Page asked for a slight delay in picking up the countdown at this point. Well, he checks a couple of things which he heard during the countdown. He has just checked with the range safety officer to determine that a dropout of the main carrier wave that is used by the range safety people is not serious, and that a backup carrier signal is satisfactory. He is also checking on several other things, and we will get back to you as soon as a determination has been made to pick up the countdown. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
All right, Gene, so they have not resumed the countdown as planned at the appropriate time. What precisely do you suppose is the difficulty?
Frank, I don't interpret that as being anything serious. George Page, the test conductor, again, has seen a few little questions he has. There's no problem in extending this hold an extra minute or two or three. We're in a very appropriate point to pick up the count at T-minus 9 minutes, and perhaps it may go at 10:05 or 10:03 or 10:07. But the test conductor wants to make sure. This is a test program. It's not just a test program in space, but it's a test program from the ground on up, and he's part of that test program. He just wants to make sure that everything that can be done on the ground to alleviate any problems at all is going to be taken care of.
Okay, let's see if we can get some more information about this now from Steve Bell and Joe Allen, who are at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Steve?
Frank, we're sitting here listening in on these messages just as you are and trying to interpret them. Joe, how do you assess what's just been told us?
Steve, it sounds like it's a problem in Florida that has to do with people that follow the spacecraft outbound, make sure it's in good, healthy state, and for some reason they've lost a radar or something. I'm unsure as to what's happened.
But could this conceivably hold things up for a long time?
It's conceivable. I think they'll fix it fairly quickly. There's several methods to track it, and we'll see what happens.
And as we've just been pointing out, we are in a situation where everybody will take that extra minute to do that extra check. It's not critical right now if you fall 10, 20 minutes. How long do we have this morning?
We have certainly over an hour. I would guess about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So indeed, that's the reason for the hold. We have a choice of picking it up, so we can wait and be a little patient for a few minutes here.
Okay, now you've been through all this in the simulators. You're looking forward to a mission in the future where it'll be your baby. What is an astronaut thinking about when you suddenly hear something like this? The countdown doesn't resume. Are you really busy, or do you have time to think about what's ahead?
Well, I think Joe Engle said it well last time. He, when heard some bad news, he said, take your time and get it right. I'm sure that's what they're thinking right now.
But you're not as busy. If things are on hold, you're more or less on hold too, aren't you? Voice of Shuttle Control.
Just checked on a number of problems which had come up during the countdown to determine that there are no constraints at the present time. He has spoken to the launch crew and says, let's take our time. It's been a hard one. Watch all your data, but we're going to do it right. He has spoken to the crew, and he's to Joe Engle and to Dick Truly, and said, we're going to give you a good one. We're in the process now of the test conductor going over the hold criteria with the launch team to let them know what points holds can be called and what the proper procedure is to call that hold. Launch Director George Page has told the launch team to take their time and do it right. We're standing by now to get word of the point at which we will be picking up at the T-minus 9 minutes point. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
Well, all right, we're just going to have to wait then, aren't we?
Frank, what you're seeing here, I believe, is probably the highest degree of professionalism that we can see exhibited, because we're not just on an adventure here. This is a program that has so many far-reaching effects, not just for the two guys on top, not just for a few of us looking at this launch, but for this country and for the future and for where we're going.
Well,
when George says, let's do it, if we're going to do it at all, let's do it right, I think he is looking forward to the significance of what this vehicle means to the future of this country.
yes, but at the same time, Gene, I have to point out that all we've heard all morning long now, you know, has been everything is going just fine, everything is perfect, and no difficulties. Bermuda tracking station, that was straightened out and so forth. The weather is fine. And here we are at 9 minutes now before the launch, and all of a sudden we learn that they are not resuming the countdown. It doesn't necessarily mean that anything is wrong, but I think there can be a few intakes of breath around the country when You know, it comes as sort of a surprise.
Well, those things that are
When
not...
did they discover these difficulties?
Well, they may have very well discovered them 2 or 3 or 4 hours ago, and this happens to be appropriate time to take a deep breath and take a good look at all those final aspects, those final checks, those final things that perhaps were not just right maybe 4 and 5 hours ago when they weren't that important. They are important now.
Well, yes. Okay, thank you, Gene. Well, we're in the hold. The clock has stopped, and we await a decision on when to start it, and when it does, there will be 9 minutes to go before launch. There you see the people at Titusville, about 13 miles away, still peering across the river to try to get a shot of what is taking place, and there is not much to watch at the moment because nothing is happening. But we expect that we will be able to go shortly after 10 o'clock. Well, our coverage of Space Shuttle Columbia will continue in a moment.
Hello, Houston. How do you read Columbia?
The shuttle's 3 main engines create enough energy to light New York's Manhattan Island for 7 minutes.
Back once again at the Kennedy Space Center, and you see that the clock has stopped. The count has been held, but we have just received word from Launch Control that they plan to start it again in probably about a minute or so. And that means that we're aiming for a launch now at 10:10 Eastern Time. So whatever problems or difficulties or uncertainties that caused them to bring about this brief delay in the countdown procedure, extending the hold, actually, Gene, is all they did. They apparently now have resolved all those problems and checked everybody out, and everybody says go. So we're going to go, and the clock is going to start running again very, very shortly now. While we're waiting, because nothing much is really going to happen except that that clock is going to start moving, it might be useful to remind you that these 2 men are going to live together in very crowded quarters, and they've got to be pretty good friends and cooperative with one another. So how do they feel about one another? Well, we asked Dick Truly some time ago what kind of a fellow Joe Engle really is, and this is what he had to say. Here's Truly.
Joe is probably one of the most natural pilots that I've ever met or flown with. Flying to him is a real love. He's just about as good a pilot as I've ever seen. And so his main strengths are really his, I think, are his interest in the flying of the spacecraft. He's very strong.
All right, the clock has started once again. They have picked up the countdown, and now at 8 minutes and 40 seconds or so before the liftoff. It might be worthwhile, of course, since we've already heard from Dick Truly about Joe Engle. I was going to say we were going to hear what Engle has to say about Truly, and we will in just a moment. But we're getting close now. This is the this is the white knuckle time, Gene, isn't it? Let's hear what Engle has to say about Truly.
First of all, he's a superhuman being. Dick and I get along famously together. We've been assigned as a crew now for 6 or 7 years, and that's a long time to work terribly close and terribly intimately with somebody, literally all the time. I mean, 7 days a week sometimes. And I consider it a real privilege to have gotten to be assigned on a crew with Dick. He's very knowledgeable about particularly the software and the computer aspect of the vehicle, and I lean and rely very heavily on him to carry that load as far as task sharing and task assignment on the vehicle.
All right, that was Joe Engle talking about his colleague, Richard Truly. And you see the clock here, 7 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. And at 7 minutes, they will retract the access arm. Is that right, Gene?
It's getting pretty close to the, as we say, to the white knuckle time, certainly. You know, Dick and Joe truly are good friends. Unlike perhaps what people think, here we are, 7 minutes and 14. There's a view of the hatch. The hatch is closed and buttoned up, and the white room will be, that arm you see there containing the white room will begin to swing back.
Away from retraction of the crew access arm. T-minus 7 minutes, and there goes retraction of the crew access arm. This is the walkway attached to the service structure and used by the crew to walk across to the orbiter.
This is a view from that access arm, the camera in the access arm as we see it retract away from the Shuttle Columbia.
The crew has been advised to lower their helmet visors, and at T-minus 6 minutes, we'll begin preparations for starting of the auxiliary power units. The APUs are turbine devices fueled by decomposing hydrazine liquid, which provides hydraulic power to change the angle of the engines, to operate the aerodynamic surfaces, engine valves, and during landing, operate the landing gear. Coming up on the T-minus 6 minute point in our countdown.
That's it, Mark.
All right, there you...
6 minutes and counting. The pilot, Dick Truly, has begun the APU pre-start activity.
APU pre-start is complete.
And it is complete. The development flight instrumentation, which measures stresses on the orbiter during flight, have been turned on. Recorders stop for playback after landing.
In 45 seconds here, we will start the APUs, and if you remember, of course, this is what kept us from going last week.
Yes. Jules, are you ready for launch?
Sure am, Frank. It's been a long time coming.
Yes.
You and Gene realize, of course, that all this is happening on automatic computers, the GLS or ground launch sequencer, and shortly, when the APUs or auxiliary power units ignite, the 5 onboard computers as well take over. In fact, they become the lead computers, and the GLS or the ground computer follows and checks them out.
We're coming up on the T-minus 5
We
minute
see the access arm. The white room is completely retracted now. You might sort of look at it as the crew is really self-contained in their home for the next 5 days.
Has begun.
Okay, they've started now on the APU.
The APUs, we should see a little exhaust gas. I don't know if we can see it from this distance as it comes out the trailing edge of the, or the bottom edge of the shuttle
4
spacecraft.
minutes, 44 seconds and counting.
That's our.
Yes, there it is, see?
That was, I believe, Dick Truly commenting about the start of the APUs.
4 minutes, 30 seconds and counting.
These are the chase planes that go up
We have
to
a
observe the
total of
spacecraft
16
during
minutes
launch.
of hydrazine
In the
supply
air.
for running the APU prior to
Of course, these
liftoff.
chase planes can't chase the shuttle too far, but they are valuable because
Complete. Looks good on board.
APU start is complete.
Complete.
Yes.
That was the voice of Dick Truly confirming he has started the
10
APUs.
seconds and counting.
Those APUs are used for the hydraulic system again to drive the engines, the gimbling of the movement of the big engines during launch, and all the control surfaces during the landing.
T-minus 4 minutes.
They are actually not
We
not
have
powered
begun
during flight.
nitrogen purge of the main engines on the orbiter. T-minus 3 minutes, 50 seconds and counting.
Frank, you can feel a change in the atmosphere, can't you?
Sure can,
T-minus
yes.
3 minutes, 45 seconds. The elevon, speed brake, and rudder are being moved through a pre-programmed pattern to ensure that they'll be ready to be used in flight. Little exhaust from the APUs coming out the tail of the orbiter, indicating that all is well. T-minus 3 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. The shuttle is now on internal power. However, the fuel cells are still receiving their fuel from the ground support system through the tail service mast for 1 more minute. T-minus 3 minutes, 15 seconds. The profile checks of the aero surfaces have been completed and checked. T-minus 3 minutes, 5 seconds. The engine gimbal or movement check is underway to assure that they're ready for flight control. T-minus 2
Godspeed,
minutes,
my friends. It's going to be a good launch.
The lock valve on the external tank has been closed and pressurization begun. After the tank is pressurized, the hold capability is limited. T-minus 2 minutes, 40 seconds. We have cleared the caution and warning memory. The gaseous oxygen vent arm is being retracted. T-minus 2 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. The fuel cell ground supply of oxygen and hydrogen has been terminated, and the vehicle is on its onboard supply. T-minus 2 minutes, 15 seconds. The main engines have been gimbaled to their start position, and the pressure on the liquid oxygen tank is at flight pressure. Coming up on the
15-year wait
2-minute
for
point.
Joe Engle.
Test pilot's dream. It's a long wait for him, but
counting. The liquid hydrogen vent valve has been closed and flight pressurization underway. T-minus 1 minute, 50 seconds and counting.
The vehicle is truly on its own
The
at this
gaseous
point.
oxygen vent arm is almost fully retracted. T-minus 1 minute, 40 seconds and counting.
It is alive. You can feel it, Frank. It's like that the bird is breathing.
1 minute, 30
and it
seconds,
does have life
90
in it.
seconds away from launch of STS2.
They never do get
Minus
routine.
1 minute, 15 seconds and counting. The liquid
Maybe someday,
hydrogen
but-
tank is at flight pressure.
We're only a minute or so away now.
Coming up on the 1 minute point in our countdown. Everything going smoothly. T-minus 1 minute and counting.
And we're really going to do it today. There's an electricity in the air here that was missing last Wednesday.
T-minus 50 seconds. The firing system for the ground suppression water is armed.
Let's get past 31 seconds.
We'll go through 31 seconds like Sherman went through
T-minus 40
head ladder.
seconds. Development flight instrument recorders are on. T-minus 37 seconds. We're about just a few seconds away from switching control of launch to the computer sequence.
We did it, Frank.
We
We're
have
on the way here.
control of the countdown now being conducted by the launch sequencers on board the orbiter. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. The SRB hydraulic power units have started. The SRB nozzles have been moved to start position. Coming up on 10, T-minus 10, 9. We have go for main engine start.
Baby, go. There it
We have
goes,
main
Frank.
engine
There it
start.
goes.
Minus 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. We have ignition of the solid rocket boosters and liftoff. Liftoff of America's Space Shuttle, and the Space Shuttle has cleared the tower.
God, that's great. Go.
25 seconds, roll maneuver completed. 30 seconds. Columbia now 1 nautical mile in altitude. 35 seconds. Status check mission controlled by Flight Director Neil Hutchinson. Giving a go at 40 seconds. Columbia, Houston, you're going 40. Roger, going 40. And master arm, fastest speed. 48 seconds. Throttling engine down for max. Ignore the master alarm, Columbia. Coming up on trade of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
We should see him pitching over now.
Yes. Mark 1 minute, Columbia now 5 nautical miles in altitude, 3 nautical miles downrange, velocity now reading 2,300 feet per second.
In another minute, the
1 minute,
separation of
8
the
seconds,
SRBs.
pass through max Q. Columbia still looking good, throttling engines back to 100%. Mark 1 minute, 20 seconds, Columbia now 9 nautical miles in altitude, 6 nautical miles downrange, velocity now reading 3,000 feet per second.
This shot.
Mark 1 minute, 35 seconds, Columbia now 14 nautical miles in altitude, 10 nautical miles downrange. Houston, you can expect an evap, CSW. 1 minute, 45 seconds, coming up on negative seats where altitude's too high for ejection seat. Negative seats.
Watch for the separation of the solid rocket
Mark
boosters.
1 minute, 55 seconds, Columbia now 21
Another
nautical
10
miles
seconds, we ought to see him separate.
downrange, velocity now reading 5,000
What a
feet per
picture.
second. Standing by now
You'll
for
see 'em
solid
shut
rocket
down, and then
booster
they'll
separation
separate.
confirmation.
There they go. And they went together.
Great SRBs just popped off.
Confirmed, good solid rocket booster separation.
They're going nearly 3,000 miles an
25
hour.
seconds, onboard guidance is converged unit program. Columbia is now steering for its precise window in space for main engine cutoff. Columbia now 35 nautical
Now
miles.
they're utilizing all the fuel solely out of the external tank.
There's the trail there,
Mark
but
2
we can
minutes,
still
45
see
seconds. Columbia now has
This
two
is still a
engine
live
landing
shot.
capability at Rotor Naval Air Station, Spain.
That's a quick trick to a landing at Rota, isn't it?
Status check and mission control, giving a go for 3 minutes. Houston, you're looking good at 3.
That's the voice of Joe Engle.
March 3 minutes 8 seconds. Columbia now 46 nautical miles in altitude, 66 nautical miles downrange. Columbia's 3 main engines continue to run smoothly. Engle and truly really moving out now. Velocity now reading 6,700 feet per second.
Get past the 4-minute mark is an important point, too, isn't it?
4 minutes is when they no longer have to abort back here in case they shut down. Then they're on their way.
March 3 minutes 30 seconds. Columbia now 52 nautical miles in altitude, 85 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 7,000 feet per second. Return status check in the mission control by Flight Nurser Neil Hutchinson. Engle and Truly given a go to continue.
How's that for a birthday present for Dick Truly?
Yes, that's great. Coming up on 4 minutes into the mission now.
March 3 minutes 55 seconds. Columbia now 58 nautical miles in altitude, 112 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 7,900 feet per second. 4 minutes 8 seconds. Standing by for a negative return and pressed ATO call-ups by Capcom Brandenstein. Negative return.
All right, here's a playback now of the launch, moment of ignition, and the liftoff.
It doesn't waste any time.
Oh, boy. Right up through the clouds, and then it emerged again. What a spectacular sight it was here.
Return to launch site.
There's the roll, see?
4 minutes 35 seconds. Columbia now 60. Columbia, you send your
Flying upside down.
20 seconds. 4 minutes 44 seconds. For the first time, Columbia has forward abort to orbit capability on 2 engines by throttling engines up to 107%.
That means they can lose one of the 3 engines and still get in orbit by utilizing their fuel through the remaining 2.
5 minutes. Columbia now 68 nautical miles in altitude, 189 nautical miles downrange.
I'm going to show you the launch again from another angle.
There's that water flood to suppress the turbulence.
Shock wave, yes. See it starting and...
5 minutes 14 seconds. That call up by Capcom Brandenstein says that Engle
it's going to come out of there. Watch it come out.
On 2 engines without throttling up Columbia's engine.
Oh, boy, just riding that wall of flame.
Columbia now 68
That's one I sort of wish I could do it again.
Well, what was the birthday card to Dick Truly? Have a blast on your birthday? He certainly had one. All right, we're at 5 minutes, 45 seconds into the mission. And they're pressing on toward orbit.
And that spacecraft has been there before. It is really a return to space.
We're going to show you the launch from still another angle. As you might guess, we've got cameras scattered all over this place down there. And everything is going just well in the mission while we're showing you the replays here. Is that majestic? Is that...
Joe Engle says everything's looking good on board.
Mark 6 minutes 18 seconds.
See, that's a very good shot, giving you a very good idea of just the tremendous thrust and power.
We have about 2 more minutes before the main engines shut off, which achieves them a low orbit.
Velocity now reading 14,900 feet per second.
They're really hauling the mail today.
Yes, they're going. The main engines shut down at 8 minutes and 40 seconds into the mission, and we're at 6 minutes and 50 seconds right now. This is animation now. We've no longer had the capability of showing you any live pictures. We'll see them again next Tuesday when they come down. 7 minutes into the mission.
7 minutes 5 seconds. Standing by now for single engine press to MECO.
They're about 75 miles high above the surface of the Earth, and they're still pitched upward, gaining speed and gaining altitude at this time.
And they're more than 800 miles away.
20 seconds. That report says that Engle and Truly can achieve normal engine cutoff targets even if 2 engines go out.
The further they get, the more redundancy, the safer they are. That's right. Well, the more sure they are getting in orbit, and that's the real key here now. We have about another minute to go before those main engines do shut down, and then we'll separate from that big storage or fuel tank, you see. 3 Gs, they're feeling a force of 3 times the weight of gravity. But that's well within our ability to fly the spacecraft.
8 minutes.
Suppose they've had a chance to look out the window yet?
Oh, you betcha they are. I'd like to hear their thoughts and words when I see that horizon.
65% at 6 seconds before main engine cutoff. Columbia now 63 nautical miles in altitude, 645 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 24,000 feet per second.
They left here at 10 o'clock, and it's probably about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon where they are right now.
Yes.
8 minutes, 28 seconds, standing by now for main engine cutoff.
Stand by, this is critical.
Okay, Houston, we got a good bingo.
That's the voice of Joe Engle saying he had main engine shutdown.
Confirmed shutdown. Columbia now returned to space, not yet returned to orbit. Standing by now for external tank separation. Columbia, Houston, you can ignore the IMU bites.
It is in space, but it's not in an orbit that can sustain itself. It still has to burn its smaller
8
engines
minutes,
to...
58 seconds. Confirm external tank separation.
Oh, the big
Columbia
tank is
now.
gone.
Big tank is gone. Another
Columbia
critical
now
step.
performing an evasive maneuver, moving below and beyond the external tank.
Now Columbia's alone, right?
Well, there's a few of us up there with
9 minutes, 15 seconds. Go, no, go, status check, emission control for the first ohms burn.
His ohms burn is what
we're looking at him.
is an orbiting, maneuvering rocket system they have to increase the energy, and it's also the rockets they burn to come back to space when they slow down.
Columbia, Houston, your go for nominal ohms 1, for APU shutdown on time. Okay, Dan, and we're maneuvering to attitude now. Roger. 9 minutes, 44 seconds. Columbia now maneuvering ohms 1 burn attitude using the two 6,000-pound thrust engines. Ohms 1 will be posi grade, moving Columbia forward and higher on her flight path, placing Columbia in orbit.
Posi grade, of course, is in the direction of the orbit. It adds energy to the orbit. It brings up their altitude ever slowly.
Houston, we're convinced those IMU were software bites right at MECO, no problem. Okay, and we got free on loop. I believe it's about 10, but we'll catch it in a minute.
That's a communication from the spacecraft. Steve Bell and Joe Allen are at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where Mission Control is located and where they are now monitoring and directing and guiding this mission. We have another burn coming up pretty soon. Steve?
Yes,
How are
Frank,
things there?
we have an ohms burn coming up right here, don't we, Joe?
Steve, it's burning right now, I think.
Okay, and that is the final maneuvering of the rockets to put it into the orbit we want. How soon do we know we're exactly where we want to be?
Both ohms engines look good going over the hill. Configure LOS. We'll see you at Madrid. Okay, Dan, we'll see you there. Burn looks good today.
We're about to lose contact with the spacecraft, but the engines were burning properly when it went below the horizon of our tracking antennas on the ground. And we'll see them next as they come over Spain.
But when do we know that the ohms burns were proper, that we've got it into the direct position to make the full 5-day mission?
When they check back at Spain, we'll know right away. We have to do another burn later on, but the ohms engines have tested out properly once again, and I think there's going to be no problem.
I want to tell everybody that there was one very excited astronaut here as we watched that liftoff. All of us were excited, but to know down to the precise second exactly what's supposed to be happening and listening in on it all at the same time. Have you heard anything in all the transmissions between the spaceship, craft, and ground control that would indicate any kind of problem?
Steve,
We've just lost the signal here at Madrid. The spacecraft is beyond the horizon.
We had an extended time of coverage and saw the ohms engine cutoffs for the first ohms burn.
All right, the loss of signal will stay in effect until the spacecraft comes within range of the tracking station at Madrid, and that won't be very long from now. As we pointed out, they have already made the burn to place them in preliminary orbit, and then I guess some 42 minutes into the mission, they will make the second burn to put them in their regular orbit about 157 miles or so above the Earth. David Hartman, the host of Good Morning America, has been here all morning watching it. David, what did you think?
Well, I'm sitting with Jim McDivitt and Harrison Schmidt. They've been up on top of these rockets before. They said it would be exciting. It was all right. I must tell you, I don't know how to respond.
You tell him or we will. I thought we were going to lose him.
Well, I was just shaking. I mean, it is just so beyond anything that anybody can comprehend, at least for me to comprehend. And you can't imagine. You guys told me it would be unlike anything that I'd ever experienced. Well, and that's the understatement of all time. It was so much more than I could even imagine.
You know, this is a lot more like a Saturn V launch. And it must have been the atmospheric conditions that dampened some of the sound and pressures that one feels with a Saturn V during the first STS1 launch.
Right, the first time the shuttle went off.
This time you got that heavy, low-frequency sound. You got the crackle as it got up higher. It just super.
I thought David was going to jump off the platform.
Well, we had to hold him down.
I must say, I recommend it to all of you who would like an experience of a lifetime. This is one of them. This is really something. Thank God it went well. Thank God they're all right.
Next step, David, you're going to have to go on.
Let's show you what David was so excited about.
Yeah, here it is again.
This is a replay now of the launch that took place 14 minutes ago, approximately. And what a truly awe-inspiring sight it is.
And Frank,
up she goes. It looks easy, doesn't it?
Feel of it.
Frank, I can appreciate David's excitement and enthusiasm, but if I may, I would like to say you exhibited just a little bit of that excitement and enthusiasm yourself. If ABC ever decides to put a shuttle in space, I think you and David ought to be the prime crew.
Oh boy, I don't know. You better have somebody else along to steer, I think, and to land.
Send him alone, Gene.
This is where Jim and I had to grab David.
Okay, thank you all, gentlemen, as we watch a replay of Columbia soaring into space. We'll pause for a moment. Our coverage of the Space Shuttle Columbia continues in a moment.